Close your eyes for a moment. Can you remember the last time you felt truly safe, when darkness was just the absence of light and not a gateway to something far worse? Tonight, I want to tell you about Tommy Richardson, a 7-year-old boy who discovered that some doors, once opened, can never be closed again. And sometimes, the monsters we fear most aren't hiding under our beds, they're waiting inside our own minds. The autumn of 1987 painted the small town of Millbrook in shades of amber and rust. Tommy Richardson lived in a 2-story colonial house at the end of Maple Street, where the streetlights flickered like dying candles and the old oak trees whispered secrets that children shouldn't hear. Tommy wasn't like other children. While his classmates played with action figures and video games, Tommy spent his afternoons drawing pictures of shadows with too many arms and doors that led to nowhere. His mother, Sarah, found these drawings troubling. His father, David, dismissed them as an overactive imagination. "All children have nightmares," David would say, ruffling Tommy's sandy hair. "You'll grow out of them." But Tommy knew better. He knew that what visited him each night wasn't just a nightmare. It was something far more patient, far more hungry, something that called itself the Sandman. It began 3 weeks after Tommy's 7th birthday. Sarah had noticed him becoming withdrawn, spending more time alone in his room, speaking in whispers to corners where no one stood. Dark circles appeared beneath his eyes like bruises, and his appetite disappeared entirely. "He's not sleeping," Sarah told David one evening, as they watched Tommy push his dinner around his plate. "I hear him talking to himself at night. Sometimes it sounds like he's having a conversation with someone." David observed his son, noting how Tommy's gaze seemed to focus on empty spaces, how his small hands trembled when he thought no one was looking. The boy who once laughed at cartoons now jumped at shadows, who once ran fearlessly through their backyard now refused to leave his room after sunset. "Maybe we should take him to see someone," Sarah suggested. "A counselor, or—" "He's fine," David interrupted, though his voice lacked conviction. "It's just a phase." But deep down, David felt something cold settling in his stomach. There was something in Tommy's eyes now, something ancient and knowing that didn't belong in a child's gaze. When Tommy looked at him, David sometimes felt as if he was the one being studied, measured, found wanting. If you're finding yourself drawn into Tommy's world, if you can feel that familiar chill of childhood fears awakening, hit that like button and subscribe to join our community of storytellers. Trust me, you'll want to stay with us for what's coming next. The first time Tommy truly saw the Sandman was a Tuesday night in October. The autumn wind rattled his bedroom window as he lay in his small bed, covers pulled up to his chin. The nightlight his mother had bought cast dancing shadows on the walls, and in those shadows, Tommy saw movement. At first, it was just a ripple, like water disturbed by an invisible stone. Then the shadows began to gather, pooling in the corner of his room like spilled ink. From that darkness, a figure emerged, tall, impossibly thin, with fingers that stretched longer than they should, and eyes that held the cold depths of winter nights. "Hello, Tommy," the Sandman whispered, his voice like sand sliding through an hourglass. "I've been waiting for you." Tommy wanted to scream, wanted to run, but his body wouldn't obey. He lay frozen as the Sandman glided closer, each step making no sound on the hardwood floor. "You're not real," Tommy managed to whisper, though his voice shook like autumn leaves. The Sandman smiled, revealing teeth that seemed to shift and change in the dim light. "Reality is such a limiting concept, don't you think? I exist in the spaces between waking and sleeping, in the corners of your mind where fear lives. And you, dear Tommy, have such a beautiful, spacious mind." Night after night, the Sandman returned. Sometimes he simply stood in the corner, watching Tommy with those terrible eyes. Other times, he would whisper stories of children who had walked into their dreams and never returned, of places where darkness was alive and hungry. "Your parents can't protect you here," the Sandman would say. In your dreams, I make the rules, and soon you'll understand that dreams are far more real than the waking world." Tommy tried to tell his parents, but the words came out jumbled, desperate. "There's a man in my room," he would sob. "He wants to take me away." Sarah would hold him, feeling his small body shake with terror. "It's just a nightmare, sweetheart. Nightmares can't hurt you." But Tommy knew better. Each morning, he would wake to find his drawings moved, his toys rearranged in patterns that spelled out words he couldn't read, but somehow understood. The Sandman was marking his territory, claiming ownership of Tommy's world, piece by piece. David decided to take action. He installed new locks on Tommy's door, bright new lights, even a security camera. "See?" he told Tommy. "Nothing can get in here now." That night, Tommy watched the security camera lens fog over with condensation that spelled out words, "I don't need to get in. I'm already here." The Sandman's visits became more frequent, more vivid. He would take Tommy on journeys through dreamscapes that felt more real than reality itself. They would walk through forests made of shadows, where trees grew downward into a sky of earth. They would visit playgrounds where the swings moved by themselves and the laughter of invisible children echoed through the air. "This is where you belong," the Sandman would say, his hand resting on Tommy's shoulder like a claim of ownership. "Not in that world of rules and limitations. Here, you can be anything, do anything. Here, you can stay young forever."
Tommy began to lose track of time. Minutes felt like hours, hours like days. He would sit in class, but his mind would be elsewhere, walking through the Sandman's realm. His teachers grew concerned about his vacant stares, his inability to focus on even the simplest tasks. "It's like he's not really here," his teacher, Mrs. Patterson, told Sarah during a parent conference. "He responds when spoken to, but there's something absent about him, like he's sleepwalking through his days." Sarah felt a chill that had nothing to do with the autumn weather. She began to notice it too, how Tommy would sometimes respond to questions that no one had asked, how he would nod and smile at empty corners of rooms. Most disturbing of all, she began to hear him having conversations at night, his voice mixing with another voice that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. The breaking point came on a rain-soaked Thursday evening. Sarah was folding laundry when she heard Tommy's voice from his room, but it wasn't the voice of her 7-year-old son. It was older, sadder, filled with a resignation that chilled her to the bone. "I understand now," Tommy was saying. "Dreams are better than being awake. In dreams, no one can hurt you. In dreams, you're never alone." Sarah dropped the clothes and ran to his room. She found Tommy sitting on his bed, staring at the corner where shadows seemed to move independently of any light source. "Who are you talking to, Tommy?" she asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to know the answer. Tommy looked at her with eyes that seemed far too old for his face. "The Sandman says it's almost time. He says I've been such a good friend that he wants to give me a gift." "What kind of gift?" Tommy smiled, but it wasn't his smile. It was something else wearing his face. "He wants to let me stay with him forever. No more school, no more being scared, no more having to wake up. Just dreams, always dreams." That night, Sarah and David decided to take shifts watching Tommy. They would not let him sleep, would not let whatever was happening to him continue. Sarah took the first watch, sitting in a chair beside Tommy's bed as he lay with his eyes closed, though she could tell he wasn't truly asleep. Around midnight, the temperature in the room began to drop. Sarah's breath became visible in the suddenly frigid air, and frost began to form on the windows despite the autumn warmth outside. "He's coming," Tommy whispered without opening his eyes. "He's been waiting for you to see him." The shadows in the corner began to move, coalescing into a shape that Sarah's mind struggled to comprehend. It was tall, impossibly thin, with fingers that seemed to extend beyond the laws of physics. But it was the eyes that truly terrified her. Ancient, patient, hungry in a way that had nothing to do with food. "Hello, Sarah," the Sandman said, his voice like wind through a graveyard. "I've heard so much about you." Sarah tried to scream, but no sound came from her throat. She tried to move, but her body remained frozen in the chair. Only her eyes could move, darting between the creature and her son. "Don't be afraid," the Sandman continued. "I'm not here to hurt anyone. I'm here to help. Your son is special, Sarah. He has a gift for seeing beyond the veil of reality. Most children lose this ability as they grow older, but Tommy can keep it forever." The confrontation between Mother and Nightmare is about to reach its terrifying conclusion. If you're as captivated by Tommy's story as his mother is terrified, make sure you're subscribed and have hit that like button. You won't want to miss how this battle for a child's soul ends. "Tommy doesn't belong in your world anymore," the Sandman told Sarah, his form shifting and wavering like smoke. "He belongs in dreams, where imagination has no limits, where fear transforms into wonder. I'm offering him eternal childhood, eternal safety." Sarah found her voice at last. "You're offering him death." The Sandman's laugh was like breaking glass. "Death? No, dear Sarah. I'm offering him life. Real life. Not this pale imitation you call existence. In dreams, he'll never grow old, never know disappointment, never feel the crushing weight of adult responsibilities. He'll be forever young, forever innocent, forever protected." "Tommy," Sarah managed to whisper, "can you hear me?" Her son's eyes opened, but they weren't quite his eyes anymore. They held depths that a 7-year-old shouldn't possess, knowledge that came from walking in places where reality bent and broke. "I can hear you, Mom," Tommy said, his voice carrying an echo that seemed to come from very far away. "But I can hear him too, and he's right. Dreams are better. In dreams, you never have to say goodbye." Sarah felt tears freezing on her cheeks. "Tommy, please come back to me." "I never left," Tommy replied. "I'm right here, but I'm also there, in the place where children go when the world becomes too heavy to bear. The Sandman showed me that I don't have to choose between being happy and being safe. I can have both." The Sandman moved closer, his shadow falling across Tommy's bed like a dark blessing. "The choice is his, Sarah. It always has been. I cannot take what is not freely given." Sarah looked at her son, seeing the exhaustion that had been building for weeks, the weight of fears that no child should carry. She understood, with a mother's terrible clarity, that Tommy had been carrying burdens that she and David had failed to recognize. The Sandman hadn't created Tommy's desire to escape. He had simply offered a door when the boy needed one most.
"What if I could make it better?" Sarah asked, her voice breaking. "What if I could make the real world safe for him?" The Sandman tilted his head, considering. "Could you? Could you remove every bully from his school, every dark thought from his mind, every moment of loneliness from his future? Could you guarantee that he'll never know heartbreak, never face loss, never wake up one day to find that the world is harder and colder than he imagined?" Sarah's silence was answer enough. Tommy sat up in bed, reaching toward the Sandman with small hands that trembled with both fear and longing. "I want to go with you," he whispered. I want to stay in the dreams where everything is possible." But as his fingers nearly touched the Sandman's outstretched hand, Sarah did something that surprised them both. She stood, breaking free from whatever force had held her paralyzed, and placed herself between them. "No," she said firmly, "not yet." The Sandman's eyes flashed with something that might have been anger. "You cannot stop what the child chooses freely." "I'm not trying to stop him," Sarah replied, her voice growing stronger. "I'm trying to offer him something better than escape. I'm trying to offer him hope."
Sarah knelt beside Tommy's bed, taking his small hands in hers. "I know the world is scary," she said softly. "I know there are things out there that seem too big and too frightening for someone your age to face. But running away into dreams isn't the answer. The answer is learning that you're not alone." She looked up at the Sandman, who remained motionless in the corner, watching with ancient patience. "You're right that I can't protect him from everything, but I can teach him how to protect himself. I can show him that courage isn't the absence of fear, it's moving forward despite the fear." Tommy's eyes began to clear, the otherworldly depth slowly fading. "But the dreams are so beautiful, Mom, and so safe." "I know, sweetheart, and dreams are important. They're where we explore possibilities, where we rehearse for the future, where we process the things that happen to us. But they're supposed to be a refuge, not a prison. When you're ready, you should always be able to come back to the waking world." The Sandman stepped forward, his form beginning to waver. "The offer remains open," he said to Tommy. "When the world becomes too much to bear, when reality proves too harsh, you need only call my name. I will be waiting." Tommy looked between his mother and the creature who had become his nocturnal companion. "Will you still visit me in my dreams?" "Always," the Sandman replied. "But perhaps now I'll show you different dreams. Dreams where you're the hero of your own story, where you learn to face your fears rather than flee them. Dreams that prepare you for the waking world rather than replace it." As dawnlight began to filter through the windows, the Sandman's form grew translucent. "Remember, Tommy Richardson," he said, his voice now barely a whisper, "the most beautiful dreams are the ones you wake up from." And then he was gone, leaving only the memory of shadow and the faint scent of sand. Tommy slept peacefully for the first time in weeks, his breathing deep and steady. Sarah remained by his side, watching over him as mothers have done since the beginning of time. When he woke, his eyes were his own again, bright, curious, and wonderfully, beautifully alive. The nightmares didn't disappear entirely. Sometimes Tommy would still wake in the middle of the night, fear gripping his small heart. But now, instead of facing those fears alone, he would call for his mother. And Sarah would come, ready to listen, ready to comfort, ready to remind him that even in the darkest night, morning always comes. Years later, when Tommy was grown and had his own children, he would sometimes tell them about the Sandman, not as a monster to be feared, but as a reminder that while dreams can offer escape, true courage comes from choosing to stay awake, to engage with the world, to face each new day with hope instead of fear. And on quiet nights, when the wind whispers through the trees and shadows dance in the corners of children's rooms, the Sandman still watches over the sleeping, no longer seeking to steal them away, but to teach them that the most powerful magic isn't in escaping reality, it's in learning to transform it. Tommy's journey from the edge of forever back to the light of day reminds us that sometimes the greatest adventures happen not in running away from our fears, but in learning to face them with courage. I'd love to hear from you in the comments below. Tell me what city you're watching from and what song or band you'd like to see transformed into a story next. Your suggestions fuel these narratives, and your engagement keeps this community of storytellers alive. Until next time, remember, the most beautiful dreams are the ones you wake up from, but the most meaningful stories are the ones you live while you're awake.